It is absolutely true that I reject a notion that somehow that creates a religious war, because the overwhelming majority of Muslims reject that interpretation of Islam. They don't even recognize it as being Islam.
And as we're back on America's Forum, that was President Obama on CNN over the weekend, giving his opinion of the distinctions within Islam, pointing out that most Muslims don't associate ISIS with Islam, but not everybody agrees with the president, Miranda.
Right. Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted this message. There you have it. Radical Islam, a term this president and administration have been reluctant to use, is on the march. And former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani is not mincing words, saying, quote, the United States should be leading a coalition against Islamic terrorism.
To talk more about the relationship of Islam with violent groups, we're very pleased to welcome into the anchor desk Ben Gordon, who's a published author on U.S. policy and Islamic fundamentalism. Ben, it is more than policy on a piece of paper for you. You have a very poignant personal story about 9/11.
That's true. Thank you, JD. I was supposed to be on flight 175, United 175 from Boston to LA on 9/11. And the only reason I'm alive is my wife said to me, tomorrow's your birthday, stay home, I'll cook you a birthday dinner, and I changed the flight. And so that morning, I had been up till 3 in the morning working and woke up at 8:40, and I saw the news on the images on the TV of the mall on fire and the attacks, and the same chilling images that we all saw. And so I'm grateful to be alive, and certainly it rekindled my interest in this topic.
And what was going on in your mind when you were seeing that unfold?
Well, I had a policy background. So 20 years ago, I wrote my senior thesis at Yale on Islamic fundamentalism and U.S. policy. And the issue that I had focused on was the growing threat of radical Islamic fundamentalism to the United States.
But back then, people were talking about the Taliban.
Back then, people were talking about nothing related to this, really. We had the first World Trade Center attack in 1994, and there was a brief moment in time where people focused on that. And remember, in '98, when Bill Clinton sent missiles to go after Osama bin Laden, at the time it was viewed as a distraction or a diversion. And in reality, there wasn't a real focus on this issue until after 9/11.
Mindful of that, in the here and now, we have ISIS, and the translation is Islamic State. And we've seen world history, and we hear that this is the effort to establish a modern caliphate. So how do you separate Islam from ISIS?
Well, you can't. Clearly, ISIS is Islamic. It's not just in the name, it's the core ideology. We can debate whether, as President Obama has said, ISIS does or does not represent true Islam. I don't think that's for us as non-Muslims to answer that question, but you can't question that, that ISIS considers itself Islamic at the core.
But Muslims do. A lot of Muslims do. They'll say this is not what we're about, and talking to a lot of Muslims, that's their argument, is saying, this is a terrorist group. They're using our religion. They're twisting it. They're making that this is what we're about, and by acknowledging them, we're actually giving the terrorists what they want. That tends to be the argument from a lot of people.
Well, is
that justifiable? I mean, if someone went out, let's say, and said we're real Christians, and committed a terrorist act and said this is what Christianity is all about, and we said Christian terrorist, what's the difference?
Right. So I think the key issue here is ISIS believes they're Islamic at the core, and it's up to moderate Muslims to refute that. It's up to moderate Muslims to challenge that. And so really there's a debate in Islam right now between moderate Muslims and radical Islamic fundamentalists. I think that what's happening in Jordan right now, for example, where you have the Arab street is rallying and calling for death to ISIS. When was the last time we saw that happen? The Arab street, far more often have we heard death to Ameirca or death to Israel. Never have we heard death to ISIS before. So I think the important thing is moderate Muslims need to be the ones to speak out on this issue.
And mindful of that, with the new dynamic at work, which is that graphic video, very slickly produced, but there's no escaping the horror of the Jordanian pilot being burned alive, Did ISIS miscalculate with this now? Will that galvanize the Islamic world against ISIS?
I think they may have miscalculated. It's worth noting that whereas ISIS in the past has publicly beheaded Westerners, this is the first public filmed torture and killing of an Arab Muslim by ISIS that I'm aware of. And what that means for the Arab street is significant. It's worth noting, by the way, that clerics have come out. Egyptian clerics, for example, came out condemning this act as barbaric, un-Islamic, and absolutely attacking ISIS. The fact that there are now Muslim religious leaders attacking ISIS is potentially a very important turning point. So I don't want to declare that all of a sudden there's been some sort of victory against ISIS. We're far from it. But I think they may well have miscalculated, and it may well be that Arab and Muslim public opinion will start to turn.
Now, you've been studying this for, what did you say, 23 years?
Mm-hmm.
And it would appear in most eyes that this has become a growing problem and that it's not going away anytime soon. What do you think is fueling this?
We have about a minute for the answer, Ben.
Okay. What's fueling this? Well, number one, if you go back to the ideology of Islamic fundamentalism, it starts with Sayyid Qutb, who wrote a book in the shade of the Quran. And Sayyid Qutb came to Ameirca, and unlike Alexis de Tocqueville, who embraced what he saw, Sayyid Qutb was repulsed by what he saw. The idea of women having freedoms or being able to get graduate degrees or kind of the full range of what America has to offer caused him to go back and write about the evil of Western civilization. That ideology is what inspired bin Laden. It's what's inspired a whole host of radical Islamic fundamentalists today. So number one, you have this ideology. Number two, you have a frustration born by the recognition that radical Islamic fundamentalism is failing. There's a reason why, for example, an Arab UN group published a report citing problems in the Arab Middle East that honestly are real serious failings.
You mentioned the term frustration, Ben. For purposes of full disclosure, I have to share our frustration. The clock is taking away our time. Ben Gordon, we hope you'll come back and discuss this more with us in the days ahead. We thank you for your insights. And America's Forum will continue following this Newsmax Now update.